I think the reality is that that's one of our few pieces of leverage. And when it comes to being in the minority, and I represent a lot of federal workers, I just talked to a federal contractor who would actually go without pay during a shutdown. And he told me, shut the government down, because they're shutting the government down anyway. What OMB and what Russell Vought is doing, what all these folks are doing is they're basically firing people left and right and moving agencies now out of our region, and which would devastate those agencies as well as the American people who they serve. So we should use our leverage and try to get a bipartisan deal, because otherwise they're just going to continue to do these cuts, and it's basically shutting down the government anyway.
But, Congressman, when Democrats are trying to rally around a message, does potentially threatening a government shutdown, could that backfire here? Because isn't that going to be fodder for Republicans?
No, I think there's a lot of people who are angry at this administration. There's a lot of different reasons why they're angry. Take the one big ugly bill or the rescissions package, whatever you want to point to as why you're angry, even Epstein. And people want us to be a little more forceful, actually. I think people are upset with the Democratic Party right now because we haven't used our leverage when we could have. And so I actually think that people will reward us for trying to fight back at what this administration is doing.
It's been interesting to watch your Oversight Committee. And part of the reason why you're home right now, as we were just discussing, Congressman, is the Speaker's decision to get out of town a bit early and put off the Jeffrey Epstein situation, suggesting that the administration needs some time and some space to go through some of the documents. It's unclear exactly. Maybe you can tell us a bit more. But I don't want to make this whole interview about Epstein. It's just hard to ignore the headlines today. You've got a senior Justice Department official expected to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell in Tallahassee, where she's in prison. And in Congress here, just as the House was taking its final votes ahead of the recess, a Republican-led motion here on the Oversight Committee, it was a motion, by the way, from a Democrat from Pennsylvania, Summer Lee, on this Republican-led committee, in fact, was passed with 3 Republicans to release documents, subpoena the DOJ for documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. Is that going to happen when you come back to town?
It should, because the committee voted to do so. So if the committee's doing its job and following the rules, then it should actually happen. The bigger thing is this is a crisis of the president's making. He campaigned on a cover-up of some sort of these files all last year and then said that they had it on the AG's desk ready to give out. And now, given his reaction to some of these things, as well as his reluctance to release the report, I kind of want to know whether the president is in them, and if so, to what extent his relationship was and how complicit he was with what Epstein was doing. And so there's a lot of questions to answer. And this is all the president that brought this up. He's the one that peddled this conspiracy, and he created an administration of people who peddled the conspiracy to get elected.
Well, Congressman, I just want to follow up a little bit more on that, because I know that you wrote a letter to the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, looking for additional information here. What exactly were you seeking, and did you hear back from the administration on your request?
Well, I wrote that letter because Elon Musk tweeted that week a lot of things in opposition to the president, but one of the things he tweeted was he had some sort of special access to the Epstein files, and the reason they haven't been released is because the president is in them. And so I simply said, why does Elon Musk get to see the files or have knowledge of the files, and we don't as members of Congress? And so I simply asked the AG, well, if you're going to share them with Elon Musk, then share them with the rest of the country. I didn't get a response on that. The other thing is, we're adjourning. I'm 40 minutes from the Capitol. I'm ready to go back anytime. But I do think we should be going back and not just working on the Epstein files, but, we didn't do anything to lower costs. We didn't do anything on trying to help people who are losing their access to health care. And so there's a lot of things that we didn't do this summer and this past 6 months that we should be doing. And I think recessing this early, is really, a bad look for this Republican leadership.
I know there could be some interesting town halls in the weeks ahead, Congressman. You're the ranking member as well on the Oversight Subcommittee on Military and Foreign Affairs. So I have to ask you about this report from the Washington Post that I suspect you've seen. The Pentagon's independent watchdog says it has received evidence that messages from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's Signal account, talking about the bombing raid in Yemen, were in fact from a classified email labeled secret non-foreign, making reference to being off limits to foreign nationals. Is this something you're going to investigate in your committee?
Yeah, absolutely. We've already started trying to investigate. Obviously, we don't have subpoena power being in the minority, but certainly we have to look into this, and it should be bipartisan because this basically contradicts everything the administration was saying, and particularly Secretary Hegseth, that they weren't sharing classified information on the Signal chat. Now, we felt like they were, and it's pretty clear that the information, the kinds of information they were releasing were, in fact, putting our troops in harm's risk. And so this simply confirms what we were saying, which is that this is absolutely classified, and the secretary absolutely should resign, and really created a violation that would get anyone in the military fired. And so I represent a lot of military families and veterans and people who work at the DoD, and they would get fired over this, but it seems like the secretary is above the law, or thinks he is.
Just to quickly follow up on that, will the chairman of the committee, the Republican chair, allow you to pursue this?
I've also asked the House Republicans on the committee to pursue this, and they've simply shut it down. And I think they see it as their job to cover up for this administration, even when they don't agree with the administration or when they acknowledge that a mistake was made. And so in this case, it seems like they're not going to do any investigating. They simply want to relitigate conspiracy theories rather than actually trying to investigate this administration and things that it's doing to hurt the American people.
Congressman, I want to pull on a little bit of your expertise here because I know that you served under the Obama administration as a tech policy advisor, and I want to talk to you about some other news that we saw this week, including President Trump launching his AI initiative, looking to perhaps loosen some of the regulations, speed up energy production to meet AI demand. I'd love your thoughts on his plans, including when it comes to the future of artificial intelligence, trying to keep the U.S. ahead of China. Is this an area where you see there could be some sort of bipartisan work going forward?
It has to be bipartisan. I think we do have to make sure that our country is a leader on AI. We also need to make sure that our workforce is prepared both for the jobs that AI has already and may continue to displace, and jobs that will be created by AI. And so, we're talking the AI we have now and will have in the future will need human components and humans to help navigate it and control it, essentially. And so I think the workforce pieces in there have to be bipartisan, and I did like them. There's some stuff in there I really didn't like. I mean, one of the things that places like China are doing is trying to control their people using AI. And there was sections of the report that talked about wanting to stifle certain types of speech and algorithms that might be quote unquote politically biased, but what they meant by that was basically algorithms that were not friendly to the president's viewpoint. And so I'm concerned that this administration, doesn't like truth when it contradicts their narrative, and they're going to use AI to basically try to push a new narrative, and we have to make sure we're vigilant about that.